So turning now to national politics, veterans from both parties won big last night. And here to discuss that is Paul Rieckhoff, national security and political analyst, founder of Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America, and host of the Independent Americans podcast. Good morning to you, sir. Thank you so much for being here, and a happy early Veterans Day to you.
Good morning, and thank you, and early happy Veterans Day to everybody watching. I hope it can be a time for us to come back together after all this division over the last few months.
Yeah, certainly. I think you said a mouthful right there.
Yeah, we can stop right there. Thank you.
A lot of division. All right, so this is really one of the underreported stories in this past election cycle. 196 veterans were running for Congress. A large number of people who were on the ticket all across America actually had some military experience. What do you make of last night's wins?
I think this is the real underreported story. There was no red wave, there was no blue wave, but there was a camouflage wave. Over 50 veterans and counting won elections around the country from both parties. And I think they represent a new generation of leadership. They still hold, partisan ideology. They're still deep in this fight with the two-party, what I call the two-party duopoly. But they really, I think, represent a more independent, outside of the box and victorious element for both parties. You have huge wins at the national level. You've got Ron DeSantis. A lot of folks don't know he's a Navy veteran. On the other side, you have Wes Moore in Maryland, who won by about 70%. He's an 82nd Airborne veteran. And I think, 6 years from now, you could see a veteran from the right, like Ron DeSantis, against a veteran from the left, like Wes Moore. And it's especially resonant in a place like Southern California. Southern California has got a higher percentage of veterans than almost anywhere else in America. So you've got active duty folks, you've got veterans who've gotten out, you've got retirees, and they represent kind of a silent majority that's very independent minded. They tend to reject both parties. And I think you may also be seeing that in your mayoral race locally as well.
I love that, the camouflage wave. Yeah. I love that. You might need to trademark that. I don't know if that's used.
In the newsroom with that one.
Yeah, you did. Everybody went, oh, you might need to trademark it. Of course, we talked about it here, that you're an independent. You have the podcast, The Independent Americans. So obviously you don't have the exact answer, but how do you think independents voted?
I think they voted in a way that determined this election. Independents are the ultimate jump ball. Almost 50% of Americans consider themselves unaffiliated. The biggest party in America is no party at all. Independents like me that are not just moderate, but say we want none of the above. We don't want the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, and they're a rising force. You see that in states from Ohio to Florida to even in California, where you've got a guy like Caruso that's really talking like an independent. He was unaffiliated at one point in his political career, and he's talking in a way that we've seen independents talk. It's the same way John Fetterman talks as a Democrat in Pennsylvania. It's the same way J.D. Vance, who was another Marine, talked in Ohio. So I think independents are really the most powerful rising force. And there's an opportunity not just for a third party, but fourth parties, fifth parties. We also need open primaries so independents like me can vote. And right now they're blocked out of so many states. And you see a huge appeal for ranked voting. So I think people want more options, especially in a place like California, where it feels like oftentimes you've only got one option. Most Americans of all backgrounds want more options, and they want people who can bring folks together. And I think independents represent a pragmatic, practical, patriotic approach that will continue to resonate and have a huge impact on the upcoming presidential election.
Yeah, especially, in some of these races where they haven't been called yet and the race is so close, within a percent or two, and then you have an independent who's also on the ticket with 2%. You realize that really did make the difference. We could see that runoff going on in Georgia just because of that exact issue. All right, so according to a Pew Research study, more than half of Americans, like you were saying, believe that both Democrats and Republicans do a poor job and a third party is needed. So often, though, I feel like when we see a third party enter a big race, like a presidential race, what they end up doing is siphoning votes from this one or that one and causing a little bit of a hubbub, but not really electable. Do you think we're coming to a point where they are in that majority, where that independent person could actually get enough votes to be elected?
I do. I think we saw last night that the old way of looking at things and the old way of polling is gone. This is a new normal we're facing. And I think there's a couple things you can look to. Number one, Evan McMullin ran in the Senate race in Utah. He ran as an independent. He lost to Republican Trump-supporting Mike Lee, but he did better than any non-Republican has done in Utah, deep red Utah, since 1976. He was a CIA officer. He also brings that national security experience. So I think that's a really important race to look at for how it can bode for the upcoming elections. And I always say this, if you don't think an independent could win, what if The Rock ran? What if The Rock ran as an independent and he ran against Donald Trump and Joe Biden? He would be a new generation of independent. He could bring in young voters. We see high percentages of Hispanics that are declaring as independents and unaffiliated. 50% of veterans call themselves independent. We just don't have a leader. And right now, it's not going to be Andrew Yang, somebody who was, a Democrat 10 or 12 months ago. It's not going to be somebody like a Steve Forbes or a Mike Bloomberg we've seen in the past. It's going to be somebody new, and it's going to be a new generation of young people who just reject both parties and are running not with a party, but under their own name as a leader and as a patriot first, and as a member of a party, not at all.
Did you just nominate yourself here? I'm just saying, Paul.
Or did he nominate The Rock?
I think unfortunately, in too many of these races, you've got to be a billionaire to be competitive,
So
right?
true.
But I do think that's changing, and I have a lot of criticisms of Andrew Yang and the Forward Party. I don't think the solution to two parties is another party, but I think our system does need a total disruption. Things like public financing can help. And I think this especially resonates with the younger generation that's not joining things in the same way our grandparents did. They are looking for new voices, and new voices most often come from the local community. And I think we're going to be talking about a lot of them in the years to come.
All right.
Getting those independents in the primary, I agree with you. That's really important. Paul Rieckhoff, national security and political analyst. Check out his Independent Americans podcast. It's on the website on your screen. Thank you so much for spending
Paul.
time with us.
Appreciate it.
And thank you for your service.
Thank you very much.
Somebody call The Rock.
He's busy.